Every grain of essence holds eternity.
Talk about a sandbox game, and not only is sand one of the most abundant materials we humans can come across on the planet Earth, but it also serves as the basis of Atlas Fallen, an open-world RPG that comes to us from developer Deck 13 and publisher Focus Entertainment. Welcome everyone to I Dream of Indie Games. My name is Ole Gamer Joe, and I want to send you an invitation to join us on Patreon, defeat the gaming echo chamber, and join our incredible community over at patreon.com/idreamofindiegames. Also be sure to like and subscribe to this video so that you can do your part to bring indie developers a voice. Right, so Atlas Fallen, well, it's a good thing Ole Gamer Joe had his grains for breakfast, because breaking down the plot of this adventure is going to be about as fun as being trapped in an elevator full of noxious fart gas for 24 hours. The opening cutscene does a halfway decent job of setting up our tale, introducing us to heavy topics about the gathering of essence and how we humans are but tiny pebbles in a vast desert. Thelos, an almighty god type who wants to control all essence, puts the people of these lands to work, grinding them through extreme labor in hopes of achieving his goals. However, not everyone's into Thelos' diabolical plan. We're not gonna take it. Oh no, we ain't gonna... actually, never mind. A battle breaks out as one might expect, leading to countless deaths, and players will end up taking control of what looks like one of those dudes from Avatar. Don't worry, there's a halfway decent character creation toolset introduced soon. Here we also get a taste of Atlas Fallen's poor voice acting, but more on that later. Players are dropped onto a burning planet where they'll begin to learn a few of the gameplay basics such as sprinting and jumping, but don't you worry, this game will continue to introduce more and more gameplay elements over the course of this 15 to 20 hour adventure, depending on if you do all the side quests. Atlas Fallen loves to pile on a ridiculous amount of systems, many of which just feel completely unnecessary. It's kind of like ordering the large fries at McDonald's. Sure, you could eat them all, but you absolutely don't need to, and in fact, it might leave you feeling a little dry and salty, much like this game. The core gameplay loop revolves around exploring vast open areas, completing your main objectives and side quests, while battling a variety of admittedly pretty interesting looking enemies and bosses. If you're into more modern AAA gaming, the combat here will feel somewhat familiar to you. One might make a comparison to God of War, where you'll toggle between different weapons, whether it be your axe or your sand whip, or more recently, the more action-based combat in Final Fantasy XVI. Everything comes from the power of a gauntlet that you acquire early on, with the weapons all being formed out of sand. That part was pretty rad. You'll attack enemies, have a secondary attack, and evade just as you might expect, with the combat feeling okay at best. It's kind of like store-brand food. It's passable, but all the fun is sucked out of it. Unfortunately, the more and more tutorials and systems this game threw at me, the more the fighting started to feel like a chore. Atlas Fallen introduces a momentum system which conceptually was designed to offer a bit of a risk-reward element. The more you attack your foes, the more momentum you build, which is good for dishing out additional damage. However, it also means players are susceptible to taking more damage from enemies. This momentum fades should you fail to keep your combo chain alive. However, maintaining upward momentum allows for your weapons to grow and moveset to change, which the game refers to as ascending. Your gauntlet can also heal you as it charges, but for me the whole system never really quite clicked, and if I'm being honest, it all felt a bit clunky and in need of some refinements. You have this momentum to worry about, and then how charged up your idol is determines what specials you can use or how you heal, and really, I just wanted to feel like a badass and slay some sand monsters, put together some cool combos, but the more this game piled on, the more I got bored of it and just mashed my way through the enemies. Toggling through a variety of weapons that you unlock is nice, but the weapons didn't really feel all that different from one another and weren't that exciting to switch between. On top of everything else, the game then throws upgrade systems your way. Upgrade your weapons, equip an idol, and then you also have essence stones to equip with upgrades of their own and different slots. It just goes on, and I really feel like a less is more approach would have benefited Atlas Fallen, as it becomes convoluted, bloated, messy in quite the hurry. There's even more systems for the essence stones you collect, but the dizzying array of gauntlet upgrades, armor boosts, which by the way, new armor does look pretty cool, perks, momentum. It just got frustrating and not all that fun to engage with. It's possible some will enjoy how involved all these systems and options are, but for me it made for an unpleasant and often overwhelming gameplay experience. Alright, so the combat and upgrading weren't my cup of tea, but what about the exploration? Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I loved how I could briskly glide across a sandy world, however the jumping, double jumping, and dashing felt a little bit off to me. The game has a solid map and navigation system, but sometimes reaching key areas involved jumping up rocks and cliffs that didn't look all that well defined. This meant a lot of clunky ascending and plenty of missed jumps. It's a bit frustrating. It's also a shame that the initial story setup ends up becoming a muddy, disjointed tale where characters are about as interesting to talk to as a wet towel. Mission objectives are often simple fetch quests that have you hopping and gliding around like a moron, many of them feeling unrewarding and a waste of time. And while there are some conversational choices to be made throughout the story, none of them felt like they carried much weight due to a lackluster script and just some god-awful voice performances that pull you out of the lore. You won't find any standout performances, which is annoying because there's a ton of voice acting in the game. As one example, you eventually get a spirit friend that follows you around, and I so desperately wanted him to stop talking to me, but he just wouldn't. Still, switching to the positive side of things, this world is vast, the quests are well labeled, and the upgrade anvils scattered across this world are mostly easy enough to access. By far my favorite aspect of Atlas Fallen was the visuals. The sandy landscapes are gorgeous at times with some really lovely effects and lighting. A lot of care went into crafting an interesting world full of this vast deserts, there's caves, prisons. It looks gorgeous on the right rig and mostly performed well on my 4070, which ran the game around 63 to 70 FPS at the 4K resolution, with some dips and jank here or there, but nothing major. The creatures are also fascinating to behold, with designs I can't say I've seen in a lot of other games. I really enjoyed them quite a bit. It's just a shame that these beautiful lands aren't full of rich lore or fascinating characters, because it's a world that's begging for such. As for the soundtrack and sound design, they were generally, unfortunately, kind of unremarkable. I can't recall a single musical composition from the game. I had to go back and listen just to try to recall some of it. That's never a good sign. In a lot of cases, it just felt like there was no soundtrack at all, and players were accompanied by the sounds of sand and wind, which are decent, but whenever a song did kick in, it just felt like your typical generic adventure music, nothing special at all. And we've talked enough about the voice acting, it's not good. For those of you wondering about game settings, you do have a few difficulty options and they can be switched at any time. This was nice for moments where a particular boss might be giving you a hard time. Atlas Fallen is a pretty tough game on the default settings, so be prepared for plenty of challenge if you seek it. There's a ton of graphical options to go through to customize the game as you see fit for your rig, so overall the developers have done a nice job in this regard. I mentioned before how the soundtrack for Atlas Fallen was nothing exceptional, and that's kind of how I ended up feeling about the game in general. It's a functional experience, but look, you already know there's a lot of options in this crowded genre, and there are much better games than this. The combat and upgrading is clunky and more complex than it needs to be. The abysmal voice acting, the lack of character and personality, it all led to a game that I just lost interest in. The developers created some beautiful, vast, sandy environments, but unfortunately forgot to fill the world with compelling reasons to explore it.